Welcome to Career Cafe, the podcast where we discuss all things career related to help you thrive in the professional world. Joining us today, we have Brandon Street, Jerry Ross, and Clara Webster, experts in career development and resume writing. And of course, myself, moderator McKinley Hatch. So Brandon, Jerry, Clara, tell us why you're experts in resume writing.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I've spent, as I've talked about before, I spent 20 years in the field of career services. I'm also a nationally certified resume writer professional and went through some training to get that certificate. So I've been helping people a long time with resumes, and so happy to be here.
And I'm Clara Webster. Just like Brandon, I'm also a nationally certified professional resume writer. And I've been working here in the Career Center for about a year and a half now, helping students develop resumes and look for jobs and such.
And my name is Jerry Ross. I am the employer relations person in the Career Center, and I have many years of corporate level recruiting.
Awesome. I love it. We have both you that are professional resume writers and then Jerry's perspective on the employer side. So today's podcast is going to be so good. We're going to dive into how to get your resume seen today. We know in jobs, several applicants come through, applications where employers are often looking at them. So tell us a little bit about how an employer reads a resume. I'm curious to hear Jerry's perspective as well, as you have some of the employer side of this. But yeah, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about that today?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, really one of the most important things with resumes to realize is that first impression is really everything with an employer. And another thing to realize is employers, they look very quickly through resumes. Sometimes they can get hundreds of applicants for just one job. And so you want your resume to just look very professional, but also look, at least it makes it really easy for an employer to look through and just scan the information that's in there very quickly.
So you need to make sure that's presentable, right? I mean, you've only got, as we've talked about before, anywhere from 6 to 30 seconds to get an employer's attention. That's it. And so with that, designing your resume in a way that gets their attention is really important. Today, we're going to discuss a little bit how to make sure we design it to get, through that first impression in 6 to 30 seconds.
And I focus a lot on the summary section. I remember at one point in my career, I took a 3-day weekend and I came back and I had 1,400 resumes in my inbox. So I'll be honest, I didn't read all of them from front to back all the way through. So the top section, the first half of the page, is very important to get across how well do you fit the position that they're looking for.
Yeah, there was, interesting enough, there's some eye tracking research that was done, and as well as some other research that we looked into, and that top third became really important. When we talk about 6 to 30 seconds, we know the employer spends the majority of that time in the top third of the resume. So what you do there to get their attention is going to be very valuable to your resume. And then there's the other little things, we'll talk more about today, and that's impression in regards to how I've set up the resume, what it looks like, grammatical errors that I may make or hopefully not make, right? And those type of things to get their attention.
Yeah. Why don't one of you tell us about ATS and what that means to our listeners? What does it stand for, and why should they be aware of what ATS is?
Yeah, these are fun, right, Clara? These
Oh, yes.
ATS.
Yeah.
So we sit down commonly with students and talk about these application tracking systems, right? These are systems that do the work of the employer, hopefully, up front. That's what they hope they do. So where Jerry had 1,300?
1,400.
1,400, sorry. I didn't want to leave out that other 100 applicants. But 1,400 applicants, the ATS system is designed to help filter out candidates that do not meet the criteria for the job. And so what's interesting about these ATS systems, they basically act like a copy and paste. So they'll copy the resume, they'll paste it almost in a Word version into a program that will read through it. And so the way you design your resume is important, and we'll talk more about this in a future podcast, but it's really important the way you design it to help make sure that application tracking system indicates you're a good candidate and moves it on to someone to read who's a real person, right?
Yeah, and along with the format there, you also want to make sure you're using some of those keywords that the employers are looking for in the job description, because not only will the ATS, be copying and pasting your resume into its own system, but while it's doing that, it's going to be creating its own kind of like summary of what's in there and making sure that you're hitting all those check boxes. So it's really important to use some of that industry language and also some of those keywords from the job ad.
Yeah. Yeah, this is super valuable information to know. And luckily, we have a whole podcast devoted to this topic on ATS next week. So tune in next week to learn all about ATS and how to navigate that to make your resume seen through these systems. So next, I wanted to dive into kind of the purpose of a resume and the resume basics and dive into what that looks like, what uh, not even telling, but basically showing with as much as you can on a podcast what a resume should look like to our listeners today.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would suggest we start with is before writing the resume. I think it's really, really important to make sure you understand very clearly what you're applying for because tailoring a resume will really boost your opportunity to get an interview. And so, the way that I tailor a resume effectively is make sure that I understand the job ad clearly. I know what the company, their culture, and who they are, and take those elements and make sure that I build those into a targeted resume. Again, that's where I find the keywords, but that's also where I find out where the qualifications are and how I match those qualifications because I want those things to pop quickly on the resume, right? When we talk again about 6 to 30 seconds, I want those to pop very quickly.
Yeah, and other things, with resume basics, besides tailoring it to each job ad, there are some kind of essential elements of a resume. With each, you want to have a nice little header that pops out with your name. You've got your contact information there. You want to have a summary in there that goes over, kind of just gives the employer, like Jerry was mentioning earlier, a quick snapshot of your your general experience and skills there. And that part should be very targeted towards whatever job you're applying for, because that's the part employers are going to look at the most. But along with that, you will want to have work experience, education, and even, sometimes other additional sections, like if you have a lot of volunteer work, you can have different varied experience sections, but those are kind of the basics of what a resume should look like.
When I'm interacting with people, sometimes they'll give me that question, do I need to write a new resume for every job I apply to? And the answer is it needs to be tailored. And something I recommend is having a master resume document to where you've got all of your points written down for everything you've ever done. And then you're copying, pasting into the resume that you're going to submit. So you don't have to rewrite it every time. You're just copying and pasting things that pertain specifically to that job to where it takes some of the stress away from having to completely rebuild your resume every single time you do it.
It is important though, huh, Jerry? I mean, I sat down with a student not long ago, and I tell this story a lot because of the importance of this. But that student came in and said, Brandon, I can't find a job. I've applied for over 100 jobs. I cannot get a job. And we had already had a discussion before about tailoring your resume. So I asked him, are you tailoring your resume? And he said, I don't have time to tailor my resume, Brandon, for every job, right? And I said, you don't have time not to. You just applied for 100 jobs, and you haven't gotten an interview yet. And so he said, okay, all right, I got you. So I'll give it a shot. So he goes and tailors his resume, calls him back within 2 weeks, says, hey, Brandon, I got an interview, and I ended up getting the job. And he thanked me for taking the time to talk about the importance of tailoring it. But it really is that important because if employers can spot, I don't know about your experience, Jerry, but employers have told me I can spot a generic resume a mile away. I can tell if you're applying for my job or if you're applying for 50 jobs, right? Does that seem to be the experience you've had?
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like a lot of times when we're not specifically opening up the job post and your resume, you'll find some things to where it's not even like you're applying for that job. It's so far off base for what that job would be because you were in a different mindset, looking at a different thing when you wrote it. I'm amazed at how many times I've seen resumes that I don't even know what they're applying for. Right. I couldn't read their resume. If I had 5 different job openings, I couldn't figure out which one it was for off of just their resume.
Yeah, we had not long ago, a machinist apply for one of our career advisor jobs, which we'd be happy to look at, except for the resume spoke all machinist language. I didn't even know what I was reading, to be honest with you, because I've never done machining before, but he was talking about all the machines he worked with to do that, the special tools he understood and things like that. And I thought, you look really good for a machinist job, but you don't look really great for a career
Seeking a
advisor
new
job.
opportunity in the machinist world.
Right, exactly.
Awesome. We talked about a summary a little bit and work experience and kind of the essential elements of a resume. Thanks for talking about that. What about the formatting? I wanted to touch on specifically font choice, white space, bullet points, all of that. What should that look like?
Yeah, I mean, when I meet with students that are building a resume for the first time, kind of the main formatting things I'll go over with them is sometimes people, I feel like, want to stand out with a really fun resume that has a lot of pictures and colors, because you want to stand out, right? But I tell them that's one of the worst ways you can stand out. You'll definitely stand out, but not in a positive way. And so, with overall formatting, you want this document to look very professional. Typically black and white, or one of the more kind of professional darker color schemes that you can add in just small pops of color with. You'll also want, there are a few like specific fonts that you want to use. Please, no Comic Sans or anything like that. But things like Times New Roman, Arial, just kind of some of those more basic, kind of boring, generic fonts. Other things, you want it to be well balanced across the page. We talk about having equal black to white space, which just means there's not a lot of blank areas in the resume, and the text just looks well spread out across the page. And you also don't want it to be super like text heavy as far as paragraphs go. We often recommend doing more bullet points, just because if you want an employer to be scanning through that resume and they're having to scan through a bunch of paragraphs, they're not going to be able to pick up the information that you're trying to show them.
Awesome. You guys, thank you for that information. We talked about a lot on the summary. Let's dive into that section specifically. So tell us what gets the attention from the employers in a good summary. What does a good summary look like?
Yeah, again, we talked about the importance of the top third of the resume, and something I typically encourage students to do is to have a summary at the top. Now, the summary is to help the employer understand I've got the experience, the skills, the knowledge, and the characteristics that you're seeking in a candidate. So it should be very tailored to the job, right? Use the job ad to build your summary. The summary is your introduction of who you are. And if you can introduce yourself as a qualified candidate for the job, they're more likely to invest in the rest of your resume. So the summary, again, introduces you. We'll then spend the rest of the resume verifying that summary, right? How you obtain the things that you just talked about.
So, quick question on that. Summary, in my brain, I hear summary. The word summary in my head is multiple sentences run in together. What does the summary look like? Tell us what that is.
Yeah, so I would suggest a summary is anywhere from 4 to 6 bullet points, right? Of
Okay.
usually one sentence information that you can put there really quickly.
If your quality of writing doesn't help them make a decision, I highly recommend bullet points. It's quick and to the point, and from a recruiter standpoint, they have questions they need answered. How can you answer those questions using the fewest amount of words possible? Make me read the least to answer the question I may have about you as an applicant.
Yeah, I love it. I wanted to touch on the bullet points in the summary because in my head, sometimes I think summary, there's this mini paragraph, and in many of the hiring committees I've been in, there are many paragraphs, and I don't read them because who wants to read a paragraph? So yeah, I love the idea of the bullet point summary. So thanks. Tell me the difference between a summary and an objective statement. I hear those terms constantly, but what do they mean, and what do we encourage our students to use?
Yeah, and so a lot of students will ask me, is it better to do a summary or an objective statement? And an objective statement, it kind of more, I tell them it's almost like you're kind of showing the employer what you're hoping to get out of a job, right? If you're applying for, say, a job in the engineering field, you're a recent graduate, and your objective could say something like, recent graduate looking to gain experience within mechanical engineering or something like that. With the summary, the reason we recommend that more is because that's more focused on what you can give to the employer rather than what you're hoping to get out of this job. And so from the perspective of an employer, typically they want to hire someone that they know can give them skills. They aren't usually as focused as what you're looking for out of the job. They're looking for the right person to hire.
Yeah, they already know you want the job. I mean, that's why you're applying for the job, right? That's why I tell students, like the objective statement, you don't need to tell them you want the job, right? Like they know that. Now give them information about why they should hire you right off the bat. Let them know why they should take you serious.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll have students ask, well, what about just a skills section where I just put words there? And those words are great, and I think sometimes they make it past some of the automatic tracking systems that we spoke about earlier. But the employers want to know how. They want to know where. They want a little bit more than just throwing out a buzzword saying I have it. They want a little bit more of a story to it than just a skills section. In my opinion, I encourage using that in your summary section as opposed to having a separate skills section of your resume.
Right. I agree. I mean, everybody can say Microsoft Office, right? If I just put Microsoft Office, I mean, there's how many people can say that? But if I say certified in Microsoft Office, right, et cetera, they know now, oh, he's got a certification in that area, or just that even a little bit more separates you from other people who just say Microsoft Office.
A bachelor's degree is 4 years of experience in Microsoft Office.
Right, yes, right, exactly.
I love the whole concept of show versus tell, right? You want to show them in your resume, especially when we're diving into what we'll talk about next in our work experience. Want to show them what we're doing instead of telling them you're really good at this. Show them. Just put in those numbers. We'll kind of talk about that. So, Brandon, why don't you tell us what the PARC rule is?
Yeah, I'd love to. So this is an acronym we use in the SUU Career Center. And as we talk with students, how to build these bullet points. Bullet points are probably the hardest part of a resume to write, in my opinion. A lot of people they don't know how to construct this area of their resume. I think a lot of people think it should be a job description of what they did, but honestly, what employers want to know, again, what did you do on that job that translate to what you'd be doing here? Why does that make you, why does what the skills and the knowledge and the experiences you had here help develop you into a great employer for our job? And so we use what we call the PARC rule, and there's a two-step process to this. One is first identify the purpose. So why are you even writing the bullet point that you are? What are you trying to communicate, number one, right? And then PARQ, P-A-R-Q, stands for power verb, action, results, and quantify. So I want to start each of my bullet points with a power verb, right? There can be lots of those types of things: investigated, developed, managed. These are all strong. And notice I use past tense. We usually coach, and this is different in the resume world, and you do what you're comfortable with. But we usually coach to write in the past tense, even if it's a current job. So I've got the power verb. I want to tell them the action I took. If there's a positive result of that action, I want to talk about that. And in any case that I can, I want to quantify what I did. Put numbers to what you did to really showcase that when we talk about, again, show, not tell, right?
Yeah, and with bullet points, you want to kind of have the mindset of not only showing just certain tasks that you completed at the job, but also what were the achievements from there. Employers like to see not only things that you did day to day, but what were some of the things you accomplished at that job.
And they're really looking for results-based employees. And I really love the PARC rule because I feel like it gives us direction. And they want to know, can you bring that same achievement level here where you are? Do you have a goal in mind, or do you come in and work hard, right? A lot of people are going to come in and work hard, but they love finding goal-oriented people that achieve results. And that starts with the first thing that we send them, the resume. When you have results and quantify on that, it gets you into the mindset.
Yeah, something I see when I look at resumes is they're putting past jobs from years ago at the very top, right? Right under their summary section. What do we recommend to students about what order should they put, their work experience in?
Yeah, so with this, you want to use the reverse chronological order of putting jobs, and that goes for all the sections in here, education and experience. And reverse chronological is just the opposite of normal chronological, right? So it's instead of, all the way like very first to where you are now, with reverse chronological, you want to have your most recent or present job and then go backwards in time from there.
And one thing I would suggest, and you're talking about, perhaps I'm changing careers, or I've had in my experience in a different area, right? There are options in a resume to be creative where we can create a relevant experience section. So I'm not showcasing the first job I have as my, my college job that I had. If it was at McDonald's, I'm not showing them, hey, yeah, I want a job in accounting. Here's my McDonald's job, right? But I can put a relevant experience section. I'm able to now put in my internships I did in accounting. The first things they're reading is what's relevant to that job. And then I can have another experience section that allows me still to talk about that I worked while I was going to college and those things that are important that I learned from those, but it's not the first thing they see, right?
So do you need it to be labeled relevant work experience, even if you don't have the other section on there? out of curiosity? Say you've done some jobs here and there, but they're not relevant to what you're doing.
Right,
What do you
right.
do in that
Well, that's a good
situation?
question. I mean, I would still name it relevant. I want that employer to understand these are the things I did that have to do with this job, right? And there may be some other things, but these are the things I did for this job.
And one of the questions they may have is responsibility. So, like, we want it to relate as close as we can, but if we don't have things that we can directly correlate, it does show responsibility. It shows ethic. It shows some other things that maybe they could use to help build the case for us to be an employee.
Let's dive into the education section now. So we've talked about the summary section. We've talked about the work experience section. Let's talk about the education section now. Where is that on a resume? I know we've talked in our office several times whether it matters if it's before or after work experience. Let's dive into that and talk more about adding coursework and certifications under that section specifically.
So I highly recommend within 1 year of graduating from the college, your education history comes above your employment history. It's going to be a floor to getting you jobs. So if you don't have that degree, you might not be eligible for some of those positions. If you just have your high school diploma and you've got some work experience, I think high school could go below because it doesn't help them make a decision, whereas your work history may help them make a decision to hire you. The other thing that I personally experienced is people putting the year that they graduated high school, which could show age, which could eventually be held against the person making or not making the decision to bring you on. So I do not recommend putting date you graduated high school on your resume.
Do we even include
Well,
high
and
school?
yeah, and that's a good question because first of all, what I'd suggest, we always just say lead with your strengths, right? If you think your education is your strength still for that job, then put it next after your summary, right? Then go into your, employment history. If your employment history is your strength, then put that next, right? That's how typically I lead, students through that process. But high school, that's a good question. If I have a degree in college, I'm not going to put my high school diploma. In fact, a lot of times, I tell students it's inferred you have a high school diploma. I mean, you're in college right now, so I don't even have them put it as they're earning their degree. I just have them put, the major in that and when they grad. But you bring up a great question, as far as dates on it, because I get that question all the time. Should I put a date on my education? That depends, right? This is going to be a personal decision. How long ago did you graduate? Do you feel like there may be a case that could be some ageism, discrimination there. That's going to be a personal choice, but you just have to decide with the job you're applying for, how do I present my education? Is it with that date or not? So.
Yeah, and as far as adding other things into your education section, other things you can highlight in there. Typically, if you want to highlight, like if you have a really strong GPA that you want to show, if you've got any specific like certifications with your degree, or even relevant coursework, I recommend that for a lot of students that, say they maybe don't have a ton of relevant like work experience, but they've taken courses in some areas that show, hey, maybe I've never worked in this, but I've studied it. I still know what I'm doing. And so there are cases where you can use even just your education, adding some bullet points there just to show either coursework or certifications that also help you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, guys. One more thing I wanted to note on this was with education. I feel like a lot of times I'll see students that put when they're going to graduate. What's the word I'm looking for? You guys, like, they're expected.
Oh, expected graduation, yes.
Wouldn't I, from what we've talked about, just to remove that and say April 2025, because it obviously hasn't happened yet.
Right, exactly. And if they put August 2025, I've had employers specifically say they don't need to put expected graduation date on there. I know if you put August 2025, what that means, right? And so usually we just recommend just put that future date on there. They can put that equation together pretty quickly, right, of when you'll be done. But it is important to have that. What I know what some employers don't appreciate is I put the start date and then I put to present. And now I have no idea when you're graduating. I don't know if you graduated, when you're going to graduate, right? And so really I think it's important just to put that graduation date on there.
Awesome. Yeah. I wanted to talk about that. So final touches on a resume. Really quick, let's talk about, we talked about verb tenses already. So we're feeling good about that. But as far as having someone review it, we recommend to just have someone have their eyes on it, and we would recommend for you to come see one of us, a career coach or something. But have someone review that, whether it's current boss, if they know you're, looking, right? I don't know. Who would you say is good to help review your resume?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you find someone you trust, obviously. A career coach is always a great one. The nice thing about college is you don't have to pay for the career coach there. So come and see us, if we can help there. But here's, one thing I'd say, just really quickly to cover, in your resume, and I wanted to talk about this, is consistency, right? When we talk about formatting your resume and getting together, whatever you do, just be consistent. Whether you put periods on the end of all your sentences, do it on all of them. The biggest mistakes we always see is periods on some, not periods on the others. Dates that are mentioned differently, format that's different, or different size format, or things like. So consistency is the key. Whatever you do on your resume, but yes, get it checked, right? Have someone look over it.
Yes, yeah. I always tell students there's no such thing as a perfect resume. I've seen resumes where they get passed through, 5 different people in our office, and everyone notices some little small detail that the person before didn't notice and the person after didn't either. So just make sure to get it reviewed by at least one other person, and make sure that you're being consistent throughout with your resume.
Something I just thought of that we haven't brought up yet is contact. And I remember when I had a position open recently, I had one of my top 3 candidates did not provide the correct phone number.
Oh.
And if you can't give me amazing, precise details at the beginning, I am not going to hunt you down.
Mm-hmm.
So maintaining that your phone number and your email address are perfect is one of the most important things that you can check on your resume. You may be able to miss a comma here or be off on something else, but if when an employer goes to contact you and it's not you, they're not going to search you down.
That's true.
Yeah,
Good point.
and with that, make sure you've got a professional email address. I've seen some pretty crazy ones. Last week I had a so-and-so Jedi at gmail.com on the resume. And
yes,
anyway, so
may the force be with him.
Yes, yeah, hopefully, I
Yes.
I said, good luck.
Hopefully he gets his job. You will give me a job.
Yeah.
Yes, right? Waving the hand.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so just make sure you're being professional and accurate with your contact information.
If they leave and come back, is it return of the Jedi?
Oh, my. We're supposed to leave the dad joke to the end of the podcast.
Oh, I love this. Okay, this is our last little thing I wanted to talk about, was customizing your resume for different industries. So we've talked about being creative in your resume, right? Clara had mentioned the photos and the colors and all of that. But we know that there are some industries out there that do actually require a photo, and some that absolutely will throw your resume away if they have a photo on there. So tell us what those industries are and how to go about making resumes for industry specifics.
Yes, yeah. So just like you said, there are some industries, say like kind of more of the professional, like government, law, accounting, some of those ones that seem a bit more formal. Those are ones, if you've got a picture on there, straight in the trash, not going to make it very far. But there are ones like if you're ever applying for, we have a lot of theater students on campus. So if you're ever applying for like acting or modeling type positions, those are ones where a picture would be required, because that's a big part of your job is, what you look like. Other ones like graphic design majors. Before, where I said you don't really want to stand out a lot with color. If you're going into an industry where that's how you stand out is with design and color, you will want to do the same with your resume. And so those are just kind of some examples there of where resumes will be a little bit more creative, maybe have a picture on there. But for the most part, other ones you'll want to have kind of that one column, not a lot of color, no picture, pretty straightforward resume there.
Clara brings up a really good point, and something I want to end with is, I think it's really important for you to understand whatever we've told you today. There's always an exception to the rule. And what I mean by that is we're going off of what's standard in resume writing and standard what you should be doing and what most employers say. But if an employer tells you to write your resume on purple paper before you take it in and they want you to do that, then do it, right? But most are not going to tell you that. But my point is that, there's a lot of these things we're telling you today that if you hear different from an employer, they should trump what we say, right? You should follow the instructions they have for you very closely and make sure that you provide them what they've asked for.
Yeah. I've seen positions online where they say, even though you've already uploaded your resume, we still want you to fill out the information on our application section. So this is your opportunity to prove how well you can follow the details of what this job is. And I think employers are intentionally adding some of those extra details to see if you're going to read it and are you going to be detail oriented from the beginning.
And with that, if you see one of those where they want you to put in the information again, 99% of the time, they'll have an ATS system with it too. So just keep that in mind when you're filling that out.
We learned a lot today about resumes, how to get seen by employers. So hopefully you've learned a lot today and that you'll spend some time, a little extra today, looking over your resume and editing it and getting people to review it with you. So thanks for tuning in to our podcast today. And of course, we are signing off with a dad joke that Clara is going to read for us.
Alrighty, so this one's a real knee slapper. I managed to get a good job working for a pool maintenance company, but the work was just too draining.
Oh, yes. I can see that. I can see you.
See you next week.